Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Through Their Eyes. My name is Unbi Chindam and I'm one of your co-hosts.
Hi guys, my name is Emily and I'm your other co-host. Today we'll be talking about the romanticization of toxic relationships in the media, which is a topic that I chose specifically for Valentine's Day and just the whole theme of love. I feel like this topic kind of makes me sound like a Debbie Downer a little bit, but I thought it would be really interesting to discuss because I think it's something that like, we tend to romanticize, obviously, like, in the media, like, these toxic relationship dynamics, and I think it's really important that young people especially, like, can differentiate between, like, toxic patterns and healthy patterns, and I think sort of that glamorization of it doesn't help with our idea of what a healthy relationship is. But, Envy and I talked a little bit about this actually over text. We talked about a lot of popular TV shows and movies. I one that I was really interested in kind of dissecting was The Notebook, and then Envy mentioned like XO Kitty in the summer that I turned pretty, which I have some thoughts about as well. I mean, I haven't seen XO Kitty, but I have seen the summer that I turned pretty, which I like, but there are some things that I have observed that I'm like, but, yeah, do you wanna open with any talking points on V?
Yeah, totally. So on the topic of Exo Kitty, it's kind of like I'm not even sure. It's kind of more of a fetishization of a culture rather than it is the romantic relationship itself. I've noticed like recently in the media there's been a lot of fetishizations of like ethnicities and cultures. Have you noticed that, Emily? Like at all?
Yeah, I have. I feel like with Asian culture specifically, it's very widespread, and I feel like it's something that I've noticed, like, I don't know whether it's always been, like, a niche subgroup or, like, whether it's just gaining traction more so recently, but I've noticed it specifically with, like, Japanese and Korean culture, like, a lot of fetishization around that, and that's something that I've noticed for, like, several years now, but I don't know if it's gaining traction but it's something that I've always been aware of.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like with Exo Kitty being created, that like definitely sprung upon, I guess, the newer generation knowing about it, like that and like K-pop idols and everything. I only watched a few episodes of Exo Kitty, but essentially it's just like a girl, going to Korea and meeting all these Korean people, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, they're all so beautiful, they're all so attractive," and I just feel like it's really putting that romanticism on the fact that, oh my gosh, this person's Korean, that means they're perfect for me. Like instead of seeing the person as a person, it's kind of like, okay, I'm seeing them for this culture and for this specific, I guess, this like specific sect of things I like about them rather than, the person itself. So and that's kind of the first thing that really popped out to me about Exo Kitty because it's just like I really couldn't continue watching it. Like it's a good show, but at the same time, there's just some things that made me feel like icky inside.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying with the whole, like, sect of characteristics, 'cause it almost feels like objectification. Because I feel like ultimately that's what, like, fetishization is, it's just more so objectifying a group of people as opposed to actually, like, valuing, like, the culture and them as an individual as well, and it's also just kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but you can just, like there's, like, a huge, like, marginal difference between like, cultural appreciation and, like, fetishization. Like, you can just, like you can, like, tell and I'm not really sure how to put it into words, but it is very, like, distinct because one actually feels like appreciation, and then another just feels, like, objectifying and almost, like, sexualizing, like, I don't know, but you, like, see the distinction, like, when you meet somebody who, like, can appreciate a culture versus somebody who, like, fetishizes it, like, you see it, like, in, like, the way they like, discuss it, their word choice, and just how they kind of interact with the culture, like, I don't know how to explain it because fetishization is not appreciation in any way, like, it's very icky, very,
Yeah.
very behavior.
Definitely. I feel like with like the topic of culture and whatnot, I feel like the media definitely plays a big role in that because they're noticing, oh my gosh, these K-pop idols are taking traction, anime is getting traction. And they're like taking all these things. They're like, you know what? People are into that. Let's capitalize on that. Let's make money off of that. And now it's causing a lot of girls, specifically girls, I think it's a statistic, but also men, to really just like look at these people and be like, this is okay. This is acceptable. She's doing it. He's doing it on the media. That means I can do it. And it's from a young age too. Like the media itself, like K-pop idols, like idols have always. Do you remember the Justin Bieber thing? The Justin Bieber thing, and everyone was like crazy for him. Same thing with K-pop idols because I remember being in like fourth grade, and then everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, BTS, I love them so much." And I was just sitting there like, "Huh, I didn't know that was like a big thing." And now everyone's kind of just K-pop idol this, K-drama that, etc., etc., etc. And I really feel like that's just feeding into the objectification of, East Asian cultures. And as you said, like there's definitely a huge thing between appreciation and appropriation and just like objectifying it. But at the same time, while it's a huge thing, it's really hard for the media to, differentiate between that for most people, I feel like.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of people have a hard time differentiating, like, what is it between the 2, especially in the media. But one thing I also want to bring up, I know the author who created Kitty is also the same author behind The Summer I Turned Pretty. And one talking point that I've heard, or like a lot of like critique that I've heard surrounding her, is that like it's really rare. I think this is like before Kitty, because I don't know if people still like kind of throw this, well, not throw it around, but I don't know if people still say this or if it's just like something that I would see a lot like back in the day, like when what is it? Like To All the Boys I Loved Before came out. And, what is it? And when The Summer I Turned Pretty came out, but a lot of people were critiquing the author because they were saying that she, like, never creates, like, fully Asian characters, how, like, all of her characters are, like, Wasian, and, like, what is it? Like, how she, like, I guess, like, whitewashes her characters, like, I don't like using that term, but, like, that's, like, the critique that I would see, like, that terminology, but yeah, I thought it was just like a really interesting, like, I guess like talking point because I'm just like, it wasn't something that I like intrinsically noticed myself, but it's something that I thought was like interesting because I'm like, I don't know whether that's like an intentional thing for her because I don't know whether like she's fully Asian or if she's like Asian. But yeah, I brought it up mostly just to see what your thoughts were on that, to like pick your brain about it.
No, definitely. Actually, around my school, I've noticed that. Have you ever seen like those things, like those TikToks that are like types I would date, like ethnicities I would date, like
Oh
races I
yeah, I
would
think
date?
those.
Yeah. In our school, people have like discussions about that because we're teenagers and everyone's just like, underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes. But basically, everyone's like, yeah, I would date a Wasian. I want to date Wasians. And it's specifically East Asian Wasians. And everyone wants to date them. Every guy's like, yeah, I want to date a Wasian. Every girl's like, I want to date a Wasian. I want to date a mixed person. I want to date someone who is basically quote unquote unique or special. And definitely seeing that on like the TV and being like, huh, there's a lot of mixed people here. And that's fine, representation. But when you kind of look at a person and be like, you're Wasian, I want to date you. You're mixed, I want to date you. It's kind of just like, why? And have you seen forgot what it's called, but it's like with Baby. Um
Oh yeah, Never Have I Ever.
Never Have I Ever. Yeah. So with her, it's like she shows her Indian culture, and I think I like that about her. But it's like there's also some things that kind of like threw me off because it's like sometimes she would go back on like certain things that she did. I can't really name any off the top of my head only because I've only watched it like once or twice, but I remember feeling kind of uncomfortable because she was definitely like Indian, but I feel like it was a forced thing. It was like they kind of tried to make her seem Indian even though she was a very
Americanized.
Americanized version of herself. And that's fine, being an American is amazing and all, but at the same time, it's like they forced her culture onto her to make her seem like she was Indian. And I just put a bad taste in my mouth because even when the media is like trying to, unfetishize itself, it's just making it worse, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know, because 'cause I'm like, I can't really, like, I feel like I can't really, like, say too much about that just because it's, like, it's not my, like, culture, so I can't really, like, speak too much on it, but, yeah, it's one of those things where it's just, like, I, like, see so much, like, fetishization, like you were saying, like, specifically of, like, mixed people actually, like, in general, like, going back to that point that you were saying, but that's really interesting too, that is, like, that has kind of been, like, a huge, like, we've seen so much more of that in the past decade, like, people kind of fetishizing, like, mixed people as a whole. Like, that's something that, like, wasn't really, like, at least, like, from what I, like, have observed, like, in my, like, few 21 years, like, that wasn't really something that I observed, like, a decade ago when I was like 10, or maybe like it was and I just wasn't aware of it because I was like a child. But I feel like the whole like fetishization of like mixed people, like that's kind of been more so of like a recent thing. Like people have really desired that like ethnically ambiguous look. And I think that's also true for like media in general and even in modeling. Like people like will be scouted because like they have like very like ethnically ambiguous like features, or like even in the media, like people like, the beauty standard right now is literally, like, ethnically ambiguous women. Like, and it's just something that we've seen more of, like, an upheaval of within the past, like, 10 years, and I don't know what it is. I think largely the psychology behind it is kind of like the allure of, like, mystery, I guess, for lack of better words. It's just kind of, like, not being able to, like, figure someone out, like, physically discern where they're from. I think that's what it is that, like, attracts people maybe, but I think it's just a really interesting thing that we've seen.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like now people are really into that quote unquote exotic look of like, I want someone who is like, I don't know, from this rare country. I want someone who's this, or I want someone that's that, you know? It's like everyone's kind of just like, this culture, this thing, et cetera, is so I guess, niche, and everyone really wants that. Everyone really wants to get a piece of that. And it's just really uncomfortable to be around because, I have a few people, a few classmates, and they're all just like, "Oh my god, she's from Honduras. I want to kiss her." It's like, no, that happened, by the way. Someone said that. I just butchered the name of the country, Honduras, but dang, it's just put a weird taste in my mouth because, there's not a lot of people in North Carolina who are from, Honduras, El Salvador, et cetera, et cetera. So people are like, "Oh my god, she's so exotic. I want her." Like, I don't know. That's just the weird fetishization, and then I guess like the rarity of having it because like the more scarce it is, the more people want it. But like relating people to supply and demand just seems like a terrible thing to do, but it's what's happening.
That and I feel like it sets a very bad precedent if you do actually end up dating the person, because you kind of project certain sets of behaviors onto them instead of actually like trying to like get to know them. Like you kind of like, because you fetishize them, you expect them to have like very specific traits, and like it just sets a bad tone for the relationship because you're not actually trying to get to know them as a person. You just kind of expect them to be a certain way because of these like preconceived like notions that you have. Like as an example, like one thing that I've heard of a lot, especially with like Hispanic women, is that they're very like I've heard like I hate this term so bad. I think it's so corny. Like the whole like spicy like Latina thing. Like I hate it so bad, but like it's such a common thing. It's such a common thing, and it's one of those things where it's like men will like project what behaviors they associate with that stereotype onto you if you are like Latina. Like not like all the time, but I'm saying like those men or women who fetishize and like what is it? Specifically look for that archetype in relationships. Like they associate like the behaviors that they what is it link to like that archetype onto like the Latina woman that they're dating, and it's just one of those things where it's like you're not actually getting to know your partner. Like, you're not listening to them and actually, like, learning about them as an individual. You're more so just expecting to date the idea of a person, which isn't really the healthiest because it's like, how are you gonna have a long-term and, like, sustainable relationship if you're, like, dating somebody because of, like, some fantasy that you're trying to fulfill and not because you want a genuine partner?
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, I guess the counter argument that I've heard people say is like, but I am getting to know them. I know their culture, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, you know the culture as a whole, but you don't know what their culture means to them. You don't know what that is to them. And it's like, that's the thing that I feel like a lot of people don't understand. Because it's like, let's say, you get married to a person of a different race or of a different culture. It's like, sure, you know all of the things about it, but at the same time, what does it mean to your partner? What does it mean to them? Instead of objectifying them, it's more of like a, hey, this is what that means to you. This is how I'm going to see your culture because this is just, yours. This is something that you've made yours. It's like if I came up to you and said, Emily, you like to eat this food. I know that because you're from El Salvador. Okay, what if you don't? Like, what if you don't like eating this? And I just made a crazy assumption about you. So I don't know. It's just that always this whole thing, this whole topic just makes me feel so icky because like all around high school, everyone's just like, I want this, I want that. Like they're not like they're not fruits, they're people. So we should treat them like that. But a lot of people don't do that.
Exactly, I agree. And then another like talking point that I wanted to bring up. Have you seen The Notebook? I like haven't seen it in like maybe like a year, I think, but I remember pretty well. And I like my perception of it as a 21-year-old versus the first time I watched it when I was like 13 has like changed like so drastically. But I'm like curious as to whether you've like seen it or not.
I actually have never seen The Notebook, but I do know that the same actress who played Regina George was one of the characters. That's all I know.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? Yeah, I think the first time when I watched it, like at least when I was a teenager, because I watched it a ton of times when I was a teen, I used to think it was like super like sweet. I thought it was just like this very like wholesome like love story. But now that I'm older, I'm like, dang, like Ali and Noah really had such an unhealthy like relationship dynamic between them because I remember they were saying that like they would always fight, and that was just like, and at first when I was younger, I don't think I thought too much of that, but I think now that I'm older, I'm just like why can they never get along? Like, why can they never, like, properly, like, get along? Like, why are they always, like? Because they would make it seem like it was a constant thing, and I was like, "Dang, like, are y'all just not chill with each other? Like, what's going on?" Like and I think that's really interesting because I think what that movie in specific does is kind of romanticize the constant highs and lows of a relationship, and I don't think that's necessarily healthy. I think, of course, there's, like, the occasional, like, pits and peaks, of course, in a relationship, but they're more spaced out than that. I don't think it's, like, every day is, like, a roller coaster. I think that kind of sets, like, an unhealthy relationship, and it's hard to, like, be productive when that's the cycle that you live in. And, yeah, I just thought it was, like, a really, like, interesting to kind of see, like, my shift in opinion from, like, when I was a teenager to, like, now on that. But, yeah, that was, like, my main point that I wanted to bring up because I thought that was really interesting. But, yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I feel like I don't know, I just feel like growing up, it's so much different than, like, when you're a kid. Because like, when you're a kid, you're just like, "Huh, that's weird, but, I'm gonna go with it," and then when you're older, you're just like, "Whoa, that's not cool." So I feel like when you're, like, a child, you can't really differentiate between the things, so you get really influenced, like, "That's okay, that's acceptable for me," and it's like, as when you're older, it's so easy to be like, "Oh, but kids won't get influenced by that, they're kids," but you're not, like, in that perspective. So, I don't know, I just feel like, have you s there's, like, Euphoria, you know Euphoria?
Oh my god, I also wanna talk about Euphoria, but, yeah,
Ah,
go ahead.
yeah, with, like, Nate and everything. Dude, I've never watched the show because my dad's just like, "You can't watch it," and it's like, "Yeah, that's fair." Oh, but I just remember one thing, and it's Nate and another girl, and then her best friend, and they're all kind of, like, in a fight
Ready
for
for
Nate.
casting? Yeah.
Yeah, like the love triangle, and she's, like, getting ready for him, like, 4 AM in the morning, trying to get all pretty, and then he doesn't notice her, and then her friend's just like, "I hate him. Oh my gosh, he makes me feel terrible about myself." I was just like, "Huh, will people" like, because I know in middle school, people were actually watching Euphoria, and they were like, "Oh my god, Nate is so hot." "What do you mean Nate's hot? Like, did you see him, like, fight this girl?" Like, and then I just wonder, like, how is that gonna impact them when they're older or even now when they're because like, middle schoolers are still getting relationships, high schoolers are getting into relationships, and they're watching those shows. So it's like, how are you gonna develop? Like, how is this impacting you, you know?
No, yeah, I completely agree because I think it's one of those things where it's like when you normalize it in the media, people don't not that they don't bat an eye, but I think when you're impressionable and that's the type of media that you're consuming, it kind of almost conditions you to think that's what normalcy looks like, which is really sad. I watched Euphoria. When did I watch Euphoria? Euphoria came out when I was still in high school, I think. I know I watched Euphoria actually when I was your age, so I can't really comment too much on middle schoolers watching it because I wasn't too far off when I watched season 1 of Euphoria. But it was one of those things where it's like, I remember being 16 and thinking like, "Dang, like, the show is, like, kinda crazy." Like, it's one of those things where it's like, I always, like, notice the themes that were being kind of, like, glamorized, and I always was like, "That's messed up." But I don't know how to explain it. It's one of those things where it's like I was able to discern, like, on an individual level, like, "Hey, that's kinda like, screwed up," or, like, I knew, like, when, like, certain things, like, weren't, like, okay, like, to the best of my ability as a 16-year-old, like, you know what I mean? Like, to the best ability a 16-year-old can. But I feel like if I were to watch it over again now at my age, I'd probably think differently because 'cause it's been 5 years since I was 16. But, yeah, I don't know, I think it's one of those things where it's like even if the overt, like, abusive tones, like, in the show, like, you can visibly or even, like, internally discern, "Hey, this is messed up, like, that's not normal." There's still, like, other, like, minor, like, behaviors or, like, mannerisms that you might, like, not recognize as, like, not okay, and it's something that you might, like, experience and encounter in everyday life and be like, "Well, that's, like, normal." Like, I can't think of an example, but, like, something, like, minor, like, even, like, tone. Like, you might see the way that they talk to each other and, like, assume that it's okay to talk to another person like that, like, not even, like it could be something like that, but it might be even something more, like, minute or something more, like, that's not as overt, like, I'm trying to think of a good example, but I can't think of anything, but I hope my point is getting across, like, you know
Mhm.
what I mean, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like Euphoria is one of those shows where it's, like, intentionally trying to show all of the issues the characters go through to, like, teach a lesson. It's kind of like, I guess, not like irony, but, like, when you see the different characters go through different things, like, Zendaya's character goes through drug addiction and whatnot, and then you have the whole Nate and Cassie and, like, all that. They have their own issues going on, and I feel like it's trying to show those issues being displayed, like, Ruth's drug addiction, that's Zendaya's character, you know, like all of that. I think they're trying to display it, but it's like for people who are able to discern, okay, that's bad, and they can see like the I guess the art form of, you know, like when you're trying to like for Squid Game, right? It's a thing on capitalism essentially. Like you're trying to put a point across, but you're trying to make it artistic. I think that's what Euphoria was. Like they try to make it artistic, like an artistic glamorization of like problems, but at the same time, it's like you have to be at a certain level to really look at it and be like, "Huh," you know? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just giving me those vibes of you have to be at a specific level to really just understand it all, and then if you're anything lower than that, it might fly over your head or you might get the wrong impression from it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else, but yeah, I think Euphoria, like, we overlook so much of, like, the dark themes of what goes on in the show solely because of, like, how, like, glamorized, like, the cinematography is and just how beautiful the cinematography is. Like, people will completely overlook how, like, terrible of a boyfriend, like, Nate was to Maddie, just cause like, he's attractive and just cause of, like, the entire, like, what is it? Just because of the entire cinematography of the show. Like, they won't be like, "Oh my god," like, Nate literally, like, had to freaking, like had to deal with the police because of how badly he abused, like, Maddie. It'll more so be kind of like, "Maddie's outfit on, like, episode 3 was so cute," and it's like, "Yeah, it was, but, like, we're overlooking something here as well."
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like there's just so many examples, and those are only like a few Americanized versions of them. But like I know in other countries there are like other different things. Like I know Hmm, for relation I feel like it really depends, like, something that we see as, "Yo, what the heck?" Some other people will see as, like, "That's great," and then vice versa, it's like, if we see that as, "That's great," other people might be like, "Yo, what?" So, I feel like it's kinda hard because there's, like, some things we're all just like, "Yep, that's acceptable," and then, like, "No, that's not acceptable." But at the same time, it's just kind of hard to discern, like, is that toxic? Is that not toxic? Because like, some places or, like I mean, some shows are kind of in that gray place of, like, technically, it's not bad, but morally, it seems ambiguous, if you know what I mean.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I can't think of a specific example. It's one of those things where it's like, that's not like intrinsically wrong, but it feels icky. And I can't put my finger on why. It's like that sort of like vibe. And I can't, but no, I know what you mean with the whole like cultural like relativity thing, just because I think, like, some cultures are just more tolerant of, like, what is it, toxic behaviors than others. Like, I know in, like, my culture, like, machismo is, like, a really big thing, like, men are very, like they're expected to be very, like, aggressive and very, like, firm in their masculinity, like, leaving absolutely, like, no room for, like, ambiguity, like, anything like that, and it almost, in turn I feel like it's not a global thing, but it's a very common thing among cultures for high masculinity to kind of equate to belittling or viewing women as less than. Like, I feel like that's a very common theme, especially, like, in Hispanic culture, it's kind of like the whole, like, thing with machismo is, like, men, like, they're supposed to be as, like, masculine as possible, and, like, in turn, they have a tendency to treat their wives and their daughters like shit, like, because of that tendency or because of that, like, headspace that they get into, and that it's, like, so common that it's, like, normalized, and it's one of those things where it's, like, if you come here, like, if you come to the United States, it's not as normalized, like, people will probably kinda side at you and be like, "What is this dude's problem? Like, why is he, like" you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's, like, different cultures, they accept certain things, and, I mean, I personally don't think it's acceptable for men to behave in that way, to equate masculinity with, like, violent behaviors or demeaning behaviors. I don't think that's what masculinity is, but and those, like, in my culture and, like, what is it, just, like, Central and, like, Southern, like, American culture as a whole, like, that's acceptable, like, it's well, not
It's tolerated.
it's tolerated, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely seen that with not only like Central and South American cultures, but also like the Asian ones too. Because it's like, and then also like, just literally any culture that isn't Eastern. I mean, not sorry, Western European or like American or Canadian. I've just noticed that like in a lot of cultures, for example, in like Russian culture, beating your wife, that's great. Keep doing it, buddy. They have a whole problem with that. And then in India, they have their own thing going on, and that's a whole issue on its own. And then it's just like in different cultures, it's just like why, that's why in the sense of like, why are you still tolerating this? Because the media is now becoming a bit more, I guess, journalistic on these things. Like it's trying to show, okay, that's bad. Maybe you shouldn't beat your wife up, or like, hey, don't do this. Like maybe let's not. Uh, and it's just like it's like the opposite effect because like here we're getting influenced by it, and then over there the younger generations are definitely like, yeah, this is unacceptable. But it's like the ones who are I think maybe like late 20s, et cetera, like growing up there, they're kind of just like, the media does not matter, and then they just they they well, I mean, they do change, but it's like not really. So I feel like it's the opposite there because it's the media saying don't do this, and they're still like we're doing it anyway, and then here the media's like do it, and we're like yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. I was, like, gonna bring up, what else? I think there was another show that I want to, like, touch on, like, briefly before we move on to our first segment, but, I want to, like, touch base on, like, The Summer I Turned Pretty because I think that is, like, pretty interesting. I think specifically the dynamic, of course, between the main characters, Conrad, Belly, and Jeremiah. I keep thinking his name is Jeremy, but every time, like, I think that, I know it's legitimately because that's what Belly's best friend calls him, so my brain just immediately goes to Jeremy. But one thing that I thought was, like, really interesting, somebody, like, mentioned this, is that Conrad is very avoidant in terms of his emotions, when it comes to, like, his relationship with Belly, which honestly I don't blame him too much for, solely because of the fact that he's literally coping with the loss of his mom, and it's just, like, it's so hard to work around, like, you know what I that's, like, an unfathomable loss, like, I can't even conceptualize, like, loss to that capacity, but I think it's, like, really interesting how, like, they're so young and they're dating and he's working through, like, such a huge trauma, and it's just, like, it makes me wonder, like, how I mean, I see, like, on screen how it affects their relationship, but it makes me, like, wonder, like, how young people, like, navigate through, like, something like that when one of them has, like, experienced something so, like, tumultuous, I guess, for lack of better words.
No, definitely. Like with that in mind specifically, I've noticed that media tends to portray people with parental loss as like, oh yeah, you'll get over it in like 6 months, or like you'll go through it, but only for 3 weeks. And then after that, you're gonna be just fine. Or you're gonna be like, I've accepted it, everything's great. And I feel like that just leaves a very big ick because it's like that's not how that works. That's never gonna be how it works. And especially because they're like having a great relationship or they're going through the relationship while having a very unrealistic grieving process, and then it's like a whole thing, and that just puts me in a really weird way because I guess now people kind of view it as okay, so you have parental loss and you're not going to have it for the rest of your life, you're going to get over it because that's what the media is telling them. And I've noticed that around like people like a lot of people are like, okay, you're going to grieve for 6 months, but you can't grieve for your whole life. That's not how grief works. And it's like no, that is how grief works. That is exactly how grief works. But it's like people are so influenced by the media that they're kind of just like, well, that's not how grief works anyway. So I guess that's another toxic relationship is the relationship between, the media and the people themselves, but also the people who get impacted by those decisions, like people of divorce, people of different cultures, people of parental loss. Like all of these people are negatively impacted by the negative portrayals in the media. And that makes me so sad because it's like not only in the toxic relationships that come from it too, like that makes me so sad. Oh my gosh. Like, ah,
No, I know. It's one of those things where it's like it's so hard to deal with like loss already, but then also navigating and like maintaining a relationship outside of that, especially a romantic relationship, like that's hard. And it's one of those things where I feel like that process doesn't really get enough attention in the media like at all. Like it's like something that like I don't know, we don't really see too much of because it's like grief is ongoing. It's not something that's gonna go away in freaking 3 weeks or 6 months. But um time for our segment, guys.
and what a great segue that is. Emily, would you like to introduce us to our segment?
Oh, yes. So for our school segment, as we like to call it, we're going to be talking about banned books, guys. Yeah, I think how do I want to start this off? I thought we'd start it off by like talking about our favorite banned books and like what they mean to us, just because I feel like a lot of banned books they have a very deep meaning, which is why they are banned because the material seems to be too heavy um for like school age kids, but at least that's what is alleged. But I think I think my favorite banned book is Fahrenheit 451.
I was going to say that. No. Okay, keep going, keep going. I'm interested.
And I think it is so ironic that it is banned. But I remember reading it. I think I read that when I was in 8th grade because it was on the banned books list, but, like, I don't know if it's banned in Maryland or not, but I know it was in, like, certain places or in, like, in certain school systems it was. But at the time, like, we had read that. I also read Animal Farm in school, actually. I also read that when I was in middle school, but I don't know whether it was banned in public schools. 'Cause I went to a charter school when I was in middle school. So I don't know whether it was banned in, like, public schools, um, but we had to adhere by, like, to county, like, rules, so maybe it just wasn't banned in our county. And then what else have I read? What else? I've read several, like, banned books, like or not yet banned books, or not banned in my area books throughout, like, high school and, what is it? In middle school, but I will say my favorite is Fahrenheit 451. I think it's really interesting, and I'm sure many of you guys have heard about it. It's a very, very popular book. But for those of you who haven't, it's literally about the burning of books. And I think it's really interesting just because one quote that I've always heard, and I always forget who the quote is by, but one thing that I've always heard is that like knowledge is power because nobody can ever take away from you what's in your head. And I think banned books, they shed so much insight as to like not even just like politically, but also just like how important knowledge is. And I think Fahrenheit 451 like kind of paints like a perfect picture of that. Because like when you are able to learn and you have the capacity and the resources to learn, it gives you the ability to know when something is wrong. The more that you know, the more information that you have to make judgments. And I think it's really important for people to have access to information, of course, age appropriate information. But I think it's really important for school age children to have access to like resources and information that like allows them to know more about the world around them and to be more cognizant and just to be more aware of what's going on in the world around them. I think having that like cultural awareness and just general like sense of of existing is really really important. And I think taking that away, it's just I mean, I can't think of any other phrase other than it's not right. But that's my little spiel, but what do you think, Envy? Any thoughts?
Honestly, I think you've just hit all of my favorites, honestly, because Animal Farm, that's a good one. There is a point in time when the county wanted not our county, but the state, they were fighting on whether or not to ban crime and punishment. and I love Crime and Punishment. There was that one, and then I know from McCarthyism during that time period, actually, which is really fun. I actually love McCarthyism. Not the concept, but the time period, like learning about that, that was fun. And basically, they got rid of, I think, what was it? Robin Hood and all of that. And it's like because it was communism and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's communist. You're it's like stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. That's so anti-capitalist." And that's another one of my favorites because like the original Robin Hood is hilarious and also really confusing. That was a banned book, so I hopefully it counts. It's not banned anymore, but maybe it will be because it's communist, quote unquote. Um, but I don't know. Catcher in the Rye is definitely one of them that I'm
I
like,
love Catcher in the Rye.
yeah, I don't know, cause like, that the guy, our main character, he's just, like, a complete wreck, and he's exploring everything, and it's, like it's a little bit hard for me to read because I kind of pick it up and I'm like, "Wow, that hit me," and then I put it down and I don't, like, pick it up for, like, another 6 months, and I'm like, "Wow, that hit me," and I had to put it down again. But yeah, Catcher in the Rye, Fahrenheit 451, Crime and Punishment, all of the classics basically. I don't know, and they're just all getting banned now, but those were definitely some of my favorites. Um, and there's another one, I can't remember the name of it because it's in Spanish, but I'm pretty sure that's banned in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and Tennessee. So all of the states basically surrounding NC at the moment. So when I do find it, I'll send it to you, Emily. It's really interesting. Basically, it's about this guy and he is living in a capitalist society, but it's a capitalist society that's very, very, very authoritarian, but it's under the guise of being capitalist society. So it's basically like a whole Mussolini thing. Well, not really, but it's like Mussolini if he was pretending to be a capitalist dictatorship, essentially. And the guy is like, you know what? Screw this. I'm gonna take down the government. So he does, and it's amazing. I think it has like 700 pages. It's really long, but it's really good. So that's my banned books.
Yeah. I think
Envy,
another one.
Envy, why are you sideways?
Why am I sideways? Okay.
Uh-oh, so you can make it widescreen again. Go ahead then. Um, Emily, you talk and Envy will
Oh,
fix it.
what I was saying was another banned book that I read while I was still like in grade school was The Handmaid's Tale, which I think is very, very interesting, especially considering everything that's going on right now. Um, what was I gonna say? I think in general, it's really important for us to know what is it, like, issues that pertain to, like, women and to be able to make our own judgments and to be able to raise awareness of that because I think The Handmaid's Tale, it's honestly very well written and it's an extremely pensive read. I also watched the show myself, and I think it's one of those things where, like, you see a lot of what is it, like, themes relating to, like, misogyny and just, like, the objectification of women, and these are concepts that have just been constants throughout society, and I think it's really important to raise awareness and for, like, what is it, people to actually know that these things have happened or some not these things, like, verbatim, I guess, for lack of better words, but I think it's important to know that these themes have been recurrent in society for what is it, for a good amount of history, for all of history, really, when you think about it, and I think banned books in general, they just hold I think people just get intimidated by the themes and just how profound they are, and I think people want material, I guess, for lack of better words, that it's more palatable, but I think it's really important for us to talk about these things. It's something that issues relating to the concepts that are in these books, they don't go away because we don't discuss them. It's something that really only gets suppressed. And I think it's important to talk about the things that are in these books.
Envy, go ahead and turn your phone around 45 and then fix it. There you go.
Okay. Little mishap, guys. But yeah, definitely. As you were saying, it's just actually I don't know, because right now what I'm thinking of is there's all of these books and similar to The Handmaid's Tale, there's one of them that we got to read in like 7th grade, and it was talking about something similar, But this is just like a thought, but there's this one girl, and she was, like, crying when after she read it, and she was, like, unconsolable, and I just remember, like, listening to her, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," because like, she felt, like, so moved by it, and apparently what happened was she grew up in, like, Venezuela, and then there's, like, the whole communist thing and a lot of suppression, so I feel like I don't know, I feel like it's just really I guess we're very privileged, I guess, to put it in a very confusing way. Because here in America, we can still read these banned books. We can still read these things, but over there, she didn't really have much knowledge. And reading like a book like The Handmaid's Tale and whatnot, and like actually consolidating this knowledge just made her cry. And that was so moving. That's just a random thought I wanted to put in there. Um, but yeah, it just like really shows how banned books can uplift the soul, even though they're seen as, I guess, negative or detrimental to society.
No, I completely agree with you. Like, there are some places in the world where people are completely restricted from like having access to these resources and to these materials and to these books. And it's one of those things where like their governments do it literally because they weaponize these people's ignorance against them. They don't have access. They literally they can't read those books, so they don't know any better. That's all they know. And your ignorance is what keeps you submissive. And it's so sad. And like it's what makes you gullible and, like, easier to, I guess, kind of, like, it's what makes, like, you easier to it makes you more susceptible to deception, essentially, and it's, what am I trying to, like, say, make my point? I guess what I'm trying to say is that knowledge is important because your knowledge is power, like I was saying earlier, and your ignorance when you are ignorant, it can literally be weaponized against you, and it's really sad that there are places in the world where you legitimately cannot get your hands on books like these that, like, actually tell you or inform you about, like, issues that have occurred in the world or that are occurring in the world, and I think it's really important that people remain educated and read. Like, I know I sound like a grandma, but, like, it is really important for us to read because I think a lot of us and our attention spans are getting absolutely rotted by like short form content, which is sad. And of course, I'm also a victim to it, but I'm also aware. I'm also aware and I do try to read. So, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on me before we move on to our media segment?
Yeah, actually. So with the whole ignorance, I don't know. I feel like it's definitely a not really a ignorance is always bliss type of thing. I don't know. I really just can't put what I'm feeling into perspective because I've heard from a lot of people who, aren't originally from the United States. Oh my gosh, you guys have such a great selection of books and you guys are like XYZ. And I'm like, wow, you guys didn't read this? And they're like, no. And it's like it really puts into perspective how gifted we are in sense of we're able to read all of these things, able to gain all of these things. And then just a random thought out there. So right now in North Carolina, we have our whole hurricane thing, and everyone's like, we got to fix that. And then there's this one author, and she was basically writing a book about all that's happening and then like the generational issues and trauma of what's happening in like Western North Carolina and like how like it's been a decade, not a decade, but like a century long thing of, how it's led up to this and how the government isn't doing much and how like devastating it is and all of that. And then she tried publishing it, but the publishers were like, no, you can't publish this because it doesn't meet her guidelines. And she like tried multiple times to publish this book. And then people were like, no, you can't publish this. So I guess it's like when I guess there's like an issue, we're always trying to cover it down, and that's definitely leading back to your thing of they're trying to keep us ignorant because it's like they're trying to say, no, it's just a hurricane. There's no strings attached. It's just a hurricane. But in reality, there's a lot that goes into the impact it had and the things that it did to our state.
Um, what was I gonna say? I was really just about to wrap up and move up into media, but then I was like, wait, I don't even know if that's a good transition or not. Like,
No, we can go to media. What are you thinking, Emily?
what am I thinking? Do you want to start? What have you been listening to? What have you been watching lately?
Okay. So there is this one book and it's called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. It's a great book. A lot of people who are on the more older side, I think they'll definitely like it. Um, I like it, but basically it's about this couple and then they're a Jewish couple and they're trying to basically survive in like the slums and whatnot. And then there's like It's basically just racial segregation, and it's like how the I guess like the white elites they live in a specific area and then everyone else kind of just lives in like these slums in these like areas that aren't well off, and it's basically Moshi and his wife's like a miracle worker, and then there's like their friends who are black Americans, and then you have like people from all over the world, and they're all in like that one, I think it's New York, Pennsylvania, I'm not sure where it is. And they're just like all going on about their lives, and then they have a little boy, and then the little boy is basically like one of the neighbor's kids, and he isn't able to, I think, hear. So because of that, he basically gets taken to a mental asylum, and then it's the job of the whole like community to go get him out. So it really just talks about like community, racial segregation, all of those things, and it's written pretty well. I don't really like how the author writes woman because he is pretty objective and weirdly sexual about it, but everything else is like pretty good. So if you just kind of look at that and be like, okay, this is strange, and then you move on from it, it's a good read. I would rate it like with the sexual thing, and I'd put like a 6.5 out of 10 because that just off put me for like chapters on it. I was like, wow, he really can't write woman, but everything else is pretty decent.
Yeah, I think that would throw me off too, but overall, it sounds like a very, very good book thematically. In terms of books, recently I've been reading A Picture of Dorian Gray actually by Oscar Wilde. I read the first few chapters. I actually really like it. The style of writing is really good, and I think I'm definitely gonna pick up more Oscar Wilde, like what is it? Once I finish with this, because it's very captivating, and I feel like the style of writing, it speaks to me so much. In terms of like TV shows, and movies, I haven't really been watching anything just because 'cause I've been busy with the semester, sadly. But in terms of music, I have been listening to a lot more Paramore lately, so that's pretty good. I've been listening to Pressure and Misery Business. Those are, like, some songs that I have on repeat right now. And then what else? I've been listening to, like, a lot of Y2K music, which is kind of embarrassing. Um, yeah, like, I'm trying to explain, like, a lot of, like what do I have on here actually? I'm trying to think because I literally just like go on the radio of it. Like I'll go on the 2000s mix radio on Spotify and I'll be like, this is so good. Like,
Britney Spears? Was
yes.
Britney Spears a 2000? She was. See, this is how young I am. I'm like, is Britney Spears from the 2000s, guys?
A lot of the Sweet Escape by Gwen Stefani, that's like on there. I think I just recently added that to my playlist. I've always liked that song, even when I was a kid. It's like very much so kind of like a nostalgia sort of thing because this is what I like listened to when I was like between the ages of like 5 to like 10. Like,
Yeah,
I loved this music, probably, like, even a little bit older. But, yeah, 5 to 10, like, that's the type of music that I would listen to, and I really loved it. But, yeah, a lot of Paramore recently. I love rock music. Yeah. But a lot of Paramore. What else I've been listening to? Honestly, like, I've been circulating the same, like, 5 artists for, like, the past, like, year, and it's very, very embarrassing. I was gonna say Conan Gray, but then I was like, I, like, say Conan Gray, like, every freaking episode, but it is true, though, like, I'm not lying, guys. Like, that is literally what I have been listening to.
Fun and great. Oh my gosh. No, for me, it's definitely like sales and Smashing Pumpkins. Emily introduced that to me, I think in like December or November, something like that. And then I don't know. For like childhood songs, I think mine were like Stan by, like, Eminem and then, like, Dido songs. I don't know, those are my songs because like, every day I listen to, like, Stan in the car with my dad. I don't know why he showed me Stan. Out of all the Eminem songs he coulda showed me, he showed me Stan, like, the one about a crazed fan. Why did he show me that one? Like, there's so many good ones. He was like, "No, we're gonna." I mean, Stan is, like, one of the best. I love that song, but at the same time, it's like, "Dang, you're showing your 8-year-old Stan? That's where you're drawing the lines?" Okay, and then I don't know. I really don't know. What about you, Emily? Any more songs?
I think my top 3 songs right now, like, looking at my liked on Spotify would definitely have to be "Pressure" by Paramore, "Stop Selling Her Drugs" by Bakar and Dominic Fike, and then "Real Man" by Biba Doobie. I've been listening to those 3 songs on, like, repeat. I love them. I've been listening to a lot of Biba Doobie. "California," "Beaches," and "Cologne" are also really, really good songs by Biba Doobie. I love just saying her name, Biba Doobie.
Beep a doobie. No, her song names are so fun. I love them. Like,
They're very random, and I remember she was a very, like, niche, like, indie artist back in, like, 2018. Because I remember there were some songs that I knew by her, but, like, I wasn't super like, into her like how I am now, now that she has, like, official albums. 'Cause I think back then it was only EPs or, like, I only knew of her EPs, but I don't know, it's really crazy to see how, like, the rise and, like, indie artists because, mm, pop has definitely come back. I feel like rap and, like, R&B, like, they still, like, dominate the charts, but they're not, like, the center, like, genre like they were back in, like, 2018. I feel like we're seeing, like, a rise in, like, pop girls again. Like, we have, like, Sabrina Carpenter, we have Gracie Abrams, I think that's how you say her name,
Olivia Rodrigo.
Olivia
That's
Rodrigo. What else do we have? I feel like there's another one. Tate McRae.
mm,
And who else? Charlie XCX. Yeah, like, we're seeing a lot of actually, there are a lot of pop girls right now, like, there are a lot of them,
oh my
but
god, yeah.
that's the biggest genre right now. I know, like, indie music was super, super big in, like, 2018, like, 2019. I still listen to indie music, I don't care, I love it, I love rock music, but that's something that will just never die because it's classic at the end of the
Yeah,
day.
definitely. I don't know, indie music is definitely my fave. Like, indie pop, indie rock, indie folk, those, like, anything of, like, those genres or, like, I don't know, straight up indie makes me happy. Like, TV Girl makes me happy, but TV Girl's not really, like, my vibe, if that makes sense. Like, I love TV Girl, but not that much. Like, I
I
love them, but they're, like, straight indie, and I don't know. I don't vibe with that.
Yeah, I like some TV girl songs, but it's like they're not like my favorite by any mean. Like I have like some songs like in my like playlist, but I can't be like I would go to a TV girl concert. Like if it were like I don't know, like I wouldn't spend like hundreds upon hundreds to like go see TV girl.
Yeah. I
And
don't
hundreds.
know. I feel like it's like that, like, acoustic sounding type of indie, like, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, Sales, that's, like, acoustic sounding indie, Biba Doobie, sometimes she has, like, her own thing. Who are, like, the oh my god, M. Behold, she's more into jazz. No, I only know her because of the jazz thing she did with Steven Sanchez, but she's cool. She does, like, acoustic things sometimes. She's, like, the one who did, like, Numb Little Bug and all of that. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Let's
I don't
see.
know.
What TV girl song do I like? I don't even know how to classify Billy because I feel like Billy was like I considered Billy indie for a long time. Like when Don't Smile at Me came out, like I loved that so freaking much. I think I was like in 8th grade maybe when it came out because Billy and I are the same age, which is crazy when I think about it. Yeah, Billy and I are the same age. I think she might be a year or two older than me, but we're technically the same. How old is Billie Eilish actually? Let me Google that right now.
Oh my gosh. No, I
but
don't know.
but I know
Billy
I'm the same.
No, 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 go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say I'm the same age as Olivia, though. Like, Olivia Rodrigo was born the same year that I was. Yeah, we're the same
Wow.
we're
My
the exact
gosh.
yeah.
No, Emily, now I'm, like, so scared because like, when I grow older, like, I'm gonna have people and, like, artists who are my age, and I'm be like, "Oh my god, I'm the same age as that person." Wow.
That's
I'd be
how I felt.
so
That's how I felt when I was 16. I was like, "Oh my god," like, there are, like, high schoolers and middle schoolers, like, looking up to, like, the pop girls, and, like, so many of them are my age, which is, like, so crazy. I'm like, "Dude, like, no way that you were also, like, 21." Like, I don't know. It's so weird. I feel like when you're in college, because you're in school, you still feel really, really young because you're around only people your age, and you're around people that recently graduated from high school, which, of course, if you're in my age range, if you're in that, like, 18 to, like, 22 age range, like, you did, like, recently graduate high school, but you feel it more not that you feel it more, but I think you're more, like, cognizant of the fact that you're still, like, school age because you're in college. I'm drinking a sparkling water from Whole Foods. Um, but you're more cognizant of it, and I feel like you feel younger because you're still in school because 'cause you're, like it's not like one of those things where it's like you're a random 21-year-old and you're like, "Oh, I have to go clock in tomorrow." No, it's like I have to do my homework because I have, like, 3 exams tomorrow, and then I have to go freaking walk my dog and, like, I have to go to freaking class. Oh, I have school tomorrow. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you don't really feel it yet. Like, and if you do work, you work part-time. So it's kind of like not the same vibe as high school, but it's sort of similar in terms of like your schedule is school, homework, and then work part-time, and then like any extracurriculars that like you have. Like you feel more adult, like 100%, don't get me wrong, but what I'm trying to get at is that in terms of scheduling, it's similar. So I don't really think people really feel as adult until they get older or until, like, they're no longer in school.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's where the disconnect happens because it's like, you're still in school or you feel like it, and it's like, I don't know, 'cause, like, these people, they, like, graduated high school, and then maybe they didn't go to college because they wanna do, like, their music thing, so you just kinda feel like, "Okay, you're not in, like, college, you're not in, like, school." So is that, like, how you feel? Like, okay, they're
Yeah,
kind of
that's how
on
I
their own.
feel. I'm always like, they're older than me because 'cause they're not in school anymore. But then I'm like, "No, wait, you just didn't go to college, and that's what it is." I think that's how I, like, internalize it. Because like, I forget that Olivia and Billy are my age, and I'm just like I keep thinking that they're, like, 4 years older than me. I keep thinking that they're, like well, I mean, Olivia looks really, really young. I don't know how my brain conceptualizes her, honestly, but, like, I think I'm just so used to, like, thinking, like, if somebody's not in school, it's because they're over the age of 25. Like, that's what I always, like, internalize, which is, like, so wrong, but, like, that's just how I think. I'm just like, "Oh, well, like, you're not in school, so you have to be, like, at least, like, 23 years old." Like, "What?" But then I'm like, "No, Emily, they just didn't go to college." Like, that's what it is, and I'm just like, "Oh, wait, that is true." Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm not excited for that. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, when I see all of my favorite indie artists being the same age as me, I'm gonna look at myself and be like, "Wow, you're old." And I'm not happy for that.
That's how I kinda felt at first, because when I was, like, 19, that's when, like, we started seeing, like, more, like, new generation pop stars, like, we started seeing more Gen Z people, like, in the media, and that's when I was like, "Dang," like, that's how I know I'm not in high school anymore.
Actually, on that, there's, like, 5th gen K-pop groups, and they're, like, 14 and 15-year-olds in there. That's my age. You're in K-pop industry and, like, you're doing all of that, and they have to do, like, 8 or 9 hours, like, per day every week in Korea, like, training to be a K-pop idols, and it's like, when's your school? Is your school a part of, like, the 8-hour thing you're doing? Like, what's happening? I think it is, because I don't think that's legal to, like, take a 14-year-old, like, because these are, like, people from I don't even know, like, Western places too, so I don't feel like legally they'd be able to do that in Korea, but they have to give them, like, some sort of schooling, but that's just kinda weird, like, looking at it and being like, "You're 14, you're 15," and, like, people from age ranges, like, 12 to, like, 27 are looking at you. That's crazy. That's actually kinda crazy. Oh my gosh.
No, that is crazy too, because I can't imagine being that young, and I also can't imagine dealing with, like, the pressure of it as well. You know what I mean? Because it's one of those things where it's like all eyes are on you at an age where, like, you're uncomfortable with the idea of having all eyes on you, like, developmentally. Because I don't know, I think now that I'm older, like, I don't really get as anxious around the idea of people perceiving me as much. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, when I was, like, a teenager, I was like, "Oh my god," like, people's perception of me is, like, different than, like, how I, like, perceive myself. And that concept was so crazy to me because I was just like, "You don't know me, like, the way that I know me." Or, like, when people would say something, they'd be like, "Oh, Emily, this is so you." But I didn't feel like it aligned with me. I would be like, "What are you" like, not I wouldn't say to them in my head, I'd be like, "Wait, like, the way that you perceive me isn't how I perceive myself." And that would throw me off so bad, or just the idea of people perceiving me in general, because I just wouldn't know what judgments they were making about me, it would make me so nervous. Sometimes it still kinda does, but it's not something as bad it's not something where, like, it freaks me out as bad as it did when I was, like, 16. When I was 16, it was, like, crippling. But now that I'm older, I'm just kind of it's one of those things where it's, like, if it's, like, late at night and I'm getting existential, I'll be like, "Oh my god, like, people perceive me." But, like, it's not something that's on my mind constantly, how it was when I was a teenager, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know if it's the same experience for you, but I know it's, like, a common thing, like, in my psychology class. Because I remember when I learned about it, I was like, "Oh, so it's not just me, like, it's a lot of people. Okay, cool."
Yeah, I feel like right now I'm at that age where it's like I'm developing and I have like the whole puberty thing. And I'm just like, I need everyone to give me their validation. I need this, I need that. And on the topic of that, a lot of people like try to get boyfriends and girlfriends to just feel that validation, you know? And that kind of makes me feel like, oh crap, what if I turn into that? What if I want someone to like me only because I want their validation? And it's like, yeah, I'm not dating in high school, but like, dang, you know, that's scary to just, like, look at someone and be like, "I want your validation. I want you to perceive me a specific way because I'm insecure." And it's like how vulnerable teenagers especially are to that just creeps me out because it's like, what if you are an idol? What if you're, like, someone in the industry and now you want all these people's validations and you're getting hate comments, you're getting XYZ and all these things. How is that gonna affect you developmentally? Are you gonna be stunted? Like, how is that gonna work out, you know?
Actually, yeah, and I feel like because, like, you're still forming your sense of identity, like, you take it even harder because one of those things where it's like you are like, "Dang, like, this is what people really, really think of me." It's already hard enough, like, as a young adult, I can imagine, but, like, to be at such a delicate age, like, I can't imagine, like, how much harder it hits.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything you wanna say before we wrap it up, Emily?
Um, I guess my final thoughts are I'm trying to think of what I can say in terms of, like, the cultivation of this whole episode because I feel like we covered a lot of bases today, but, um, establish healthy relationship patterns, guys. Read. Please read. Like, it doesn't even have to be, like, a whole book, it can be, like, a freaking, like, news article, but, like, be sure to nourish your brain as well because it's also a muscle that needs to be exercised. And, yeah, just do something fun, like, we always do our media segment, like, it's always important to, I don't know, like, listen to music, like, read a book, or just play video games, like, it's fun to do something fun too. You need to have something for your spare time. Yeah, those are my final words.
I don't know, I guess my final words are no matter what happens this week and for Valentine's Day and for the rest of the year, just know that, you're the only person that really loves you the most. So take care of her or him or whoever, because at the end of the day, you're your person. So give them some love, you know?
I think that was beautifully put.
All right. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next month.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com and DeltaForce.net.